Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday to each of you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. We've been expecting you, and we are super excited to have you join us today for the Intentional Conversations VodCast. I'm Dr. Nika White, your host. I serve as founder and lead principal consultant for NWC, and we are thrilled to be sharing space and time with each of you today. I come today with a bit of heaviness, as I'm sure many of you do as well. There's a lot going on in this world that we are all having to navigate. And I think there is great beauty in suffering together, right? Feeling with people, those that are being displaced. And I think about all of the Ukrainians and what they are being impacted by right now. I think of the Asian community and all that they are being impacted by. It's just so much that we're holding. And I find great encouragement by being in connection with each of you, each of us who care deeply about this work of inclusion, equity, belonging, and justice. And I hope that you all will join me in whatever way, trying to stand in solidarity to show forth support and community to those who are suffering right now. I'm also mindful that we are still in the midst of Black History Month, right? And although we sometimes talk about it as a month, Black joy, Black resilience, Black love, Black excellence is something that we lean into 365 days a year. And so it's no different this year. But I do want to welcome each of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that you could be doing a number of things, but the fact that you see fit to join us for this podcast community means a lot to each of us at NWC. I will encourage you right now, let us know where you're joining the conversation from. Place it into the chat. The chat is going to be a way for us to show forth level of community as we are learning with and from each other today. So also, if you feel inclined, you can share your LinkedIn information in the chat. This lets us know that you are willing to be contacted and to be in conversation and community with those that are part of this podcast community. And we welcome that very much so. Today, we will invite you all to join with us in sharing out some of the great nuggets that we know are going to be brought to the conversation. And the hashtag for Intentional Conversations is simply that, hashtag Intentional Conversation. So we're going to be doing some live tweeting. We invite you all to share out any thoughts that are resonating with you on your social media platforms as well. We have enabled the closed caption feature. That's our way of showing up as part of our commitment to disability justice. And so if that's of use to you, know that we have activated it. And we hope that you will lean into that if it's something that's going to make your experience today better. Now, as I normally do, I want to go ahead and get us started because we have an hour full of great dialogue. And so I'm going to welcome you once again to Intentional Conversations VodCast. Great. Let me also take a moment to just let you know that here at NWC, we're celebrating 5 years. We did so at the top of the month on the 1st. It was our 5-year anniversary. It is no small feat as a small business to reach 5 years. And so we are continuing to socialize this out with those who care about our community. And we thank you in advance for all of the ways in which you have helped to support us and helped to celebrate our 5th year anniversary. Intentional Conversations is our way of showing up for the broader community, for providing a way for those who want to deepen their learning and knowledge and understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion to join with us in conversations where we bring in top practitioners in this space that are doing wonderful work, and we try to center their voices. And so many of our guest co-hosts have come by way of recommendations from you, this community, and we thank you for that. We continue to gather those recommendations, and you can send them to my colleague, Courtney Perry, by emailing her at courtney@nikawhite.com. We also show up to the community by providing courtesy information. We do this in a number of ways, but one of which is weekly. We release new content by way of a video that we entitle Inclusion Uncomplicated. It's a short snippet, no more than 2 minutes or so. You can join our YouTube channel to review all of the replays of past intentional or inclusion uncomplicated sessions, but it's just really a way to help you to stay connected to the learning journey as we continue again to lean into this very important work that impacts all of us. Now, as I normally do, for those of you who are used to visiting this community, I like to give you a little bit of what you have to look forward to in future weeks with our guest co-host. And next Friday, I look forward to welcoming Dr. Melissa Horn. My colleague, Rachel Mandirazzi, is actually going to be co-facilitating and hosting this session with me. But we're going to be talking about the role that training plays in an organization's DEI strategy and how to tell the difference between effective versus box checking DEI training. So we look forward to Melissa Horn joining us next week. And then following the next week, we'll have Jason Gant. And in that Intentional Conversation VodCast, we're going to be talking about the correlation between mental health and DEI and the importance of mindfulness and well-being. Jason talks a lot about masculinity and just making sure that men are playing a role and helping to be in touch with their senses and their masculinity as a way to show forth great level of inclusion and belonging. And then Anna Manadipati is going to be joining us the week following, and we're going to be looking at bias that arises in leadership and executive coaching engagements, the well-being of chief diversity officers, or even just leaders in the space of DEI in general, and use of teams to create a more inclusive organizational culture. So I hope that you will join us for Anu, who's going to be with us in the upcoming weeks. And then the last person that I will share with you that we have on the roster of guest co-hosts is my friend, Vincent Pearson. And we're going to be discussing the intersection of sports and social justice and how this relates to the work DEI practitioners are doing and the power of sports to impact society. I really believe in that. Sports is a unifier. We see that every year around Super Bowl time and any of the other national championship times around different sports. And so that should be a great conversation. And we hope that you will join us for that. Now, it does me such great pleasure to do what all of you are probably familiar with if you've been joining this community. I always like to make sure that I give a formal introduction of our guest co-hosts before bringing them on to share with us. I want you to know their accolades, their credentials, and then we'll let Brittany share with us in her own way. Brittany Janay is a Black woman, a mother, consultant, writer, and speaker, and advocate for equity, justice, and radical self-love. She is a self-described perpetual wanderer, learner, and unlearner, committed to being possibility for what it means to show up as her most liberated self. Brittany Janay is the creator of Liberated Love Notes, critical self-reflections, and affirmations for the culture, an affirmation card deck that centers the experiences of Black folks existing in and healing from predominantly white spaces. The cards offer affirmations for overcoming the lie of imposter syndrome, disrupting injected and internalized forms of oppression, embodying an abundance mindset, and building healthy racial identity. We're going to talk about all of that today. She's also the host of the Liberated Love Notes podcast on Living Corporate Network. Brittany is also Vice President of Learning and Innovation with the Winters Group, one of the leading global diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firms. You all may recall that we had Mary Frances Winters on our show the end of 2021 joining us for VodCast. Her contributions to the firm most notably includes expanding its portfolio around mapping the intersection of social justice and traditional corporate DEI work. Her framework for centering justice has evolved the firm's approach to learning and education, design, and strategy work. So you all know where I'm going with this. I want you all to, in your own way, whether it's through use of some of the features in Zoom or the comments into the chat, help me to welcome our guest co-host today, Brittany Janay Harris. I'm so excited to have her here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I may put her into the spotlight. So Brittany, just in your own way, welcome and provide greetings to this audience who is so excited to hear from you today.
Appreciate the love. And in as much as I understand the utility of reading a bio, it always feels, I don't know, it just hit a little different hearing someone share more about you. I will say that I felt affirmed in that it absolutely reflected how I see myself. And so appreciate the love in chat. Am honored to be sharing space with another Black woman doing this work, something I certainly don't take lightly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brittany. So I want you, now that we've had a chance to read your accolades and your credentials and talk a little bit at a high level about how in which you show up to this work, I want this audience to get to know you on a deeper level. So what can you share with us about Brittany that we would not find in your bio that just helps us to get a little bit better connected as we jump into what I know is going to be a rich conversation today?
Yes. So yes, I am Brittany Janay, and I'm gonna emphasize the 3 syllables, y'all, because Loretta makes very clear, I ain't name you Brittany, I name you Brittany. And so
Brittany, yes.
I am Brittany Janay Harris, and something that's not in my bio, but certainly a byproduct of the learning, unlearning, striving to be possibility that you mentioned, is that I am human, worthy, and enough. And I lead with that because, in as much as that could seem like intuitive, I am ever aware of the fact that I exist in this social context where I got to remind myself of that. As a Black woman, I am human. As a Black woman in this social context, I am enough. As a Black woman who is working, but also unlearning the lie of anti-Blackness and colonialism, I am worthy. And so I lead with that as an affirmation, but then also an invitation for us to embody, embody collectively. One of the things that I will often share in spaces, and I haven't mentioned, I am also joining you all from Baltimore, Maryland here, land originally steward, cared for, but stolen from rather the Susquehannock and Piscataway tribes. And so I'm zooming in from the East Coast here. One thing I will also share and like to invite folks to consider for themselves is not just who I am, but also who I am from. I think there is such power in honoring our certainly ancestral lineage, generational lineage, but even like spiritual lineage. And so at the top of last year, I started sharing and lifting up the names of folks who are near and dear to me, and how I show up. And so I am from Corey and Loretta Harris, y'all, teenage parents, but like peak Black love, and very much so influenced how I show up and strive to lead in this work from a place of love. I am from grandparents who, if you let them tell it, y'all, I am something like their wildest dreams. And so Lula B and Lula, I am from Lucille's creative hands. And so if y'all see anything out there that I have created and you consider to be brilliant, no, Lucille taught me. And I am from Elmer, who recently transitioned into ancestorship. Elmer, and even in, what is this experience of emotion, I sit here marveling in what I've inherited, his big faith in this season, especially. And so that ain't on my bio, but today, top of mind for me are certainly the community who continues to keep me lifted up. So that's who I am. I am gonna, in the spirit of holding space for joy and mourning. We talked about that earlier, y'all.
Yes.
I am also newly something like, I just wonder if they got music in the background.
I know, come with it. Let us know.
Something like a fiance.
Yeah, love how the hand goes up with the ring, yes.
And so had the pleasure of celebrating another year of life last weekend, and also being invited to share life with my partner. And so a lot happening. So I guess another I am in this season of transition, of like noticing, of evolving, of like being, and like being really like intentional about sitting with all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And from this podcast community, certainly our deepest condolences to you, and also our highest congratulations on your new engagement. So really excited for you. It's such a beautiful way to express oneself, to give honor to those that have helped them to develop into who they are, right? So I love the way that you gave such honor to those who are the giants of the shoulders that, of course, you stand on. So I honor that. So thank you so much. And you talked about the importance of asking the question of who are you from, and I love that. I love that that is something that's part of the way in which you show up in spaces. So let's talk about Liberated Love Notes. And by the way, mine are on order and I cannot wait to get them. What inspired this? How did it come to fruition? And then even talk a little bit further about the addition for Black people in DEI. I love that you are helping to show love to us practitioners who do this really hard work, including yourself. And then it also turned into a podcast. So let's just unpack everything related to Liberated Love Notes.
Yeah. And so Liberated Love Notes, something like a love project, a love practice, y'all. And in as much as it has evolved into something that is accessible to Black folks in the world, it started out as part of my own just like personal praxis, and then also wanting to be responsive to some of what I was hearing from those who are very close to me. And so, as many of you know, I am a Black woman working in DEI, and so certainly engaged in work dismantling systems that I am too personally impacted by, which was really exacerbated at the end of 2019 into 2020, just that impact. On top of that, I am intimately partnered and now engaged with a Black man in law enforcement. And so in as much as this is work, is real personal. Like it is really a lot of gray and nuance, a lot of care necessary for me to show up in the fullness, or at least how I strive to be. At the end of 2019 and at the top of 2020, I was really wrestling with what was this? Okay, I love this work. I feel like this is work that I should be doing. And yet I'm kind of really tired of it. Like I'm really tired, like I'm experiencing a turning point where I'm wondering if I'm effective. I'm wondering if this work is really responsive to all that we are experiencing. I am hearing stories from people who I am in community with being impacted by systems. On TV, we are being exposed to, and on our social media screens, exposed to like images of, Black pain, Black trauma. And is DEI enough? Am I enough? I had in so many ways had my professional identity linked up with like my sense of self that I couldn't differentiate, or, I started to internalize, if this work isn't effective, does this mean I'm ineffective? If this work is not enough, does this mean I'm not doing enough? If this work is insufficient, am I somehow not, walking in or doing, purposeful or walking in my purpose? One of the things that I started doing was writing affirmations to myself. No, Britt, like you love this work, you are engaged in this work, but you are also more than this work. And so even when this work feels insufficient, you are absolutely more than enough. When I would have conversations with my partner and now fiance about some of the nuance that comes with being Black in a very harmful white supremacist anti-Black system that causes harm to the people with whom you are in community, I had to have honest, loving conversations around, when we are. As a matter of fact, I'll read the Liberated Love Note in a bit that I wrote for him. When we are in systems that cause harm, we absolutely need to be mindful of that proximity to power and institution. We absolutely need to be mindful of how we still communicate our love and care for community. And we got to create boundaries so that we're not internalizing these systems as deficiencies in us. And so Liberated Love Notes were literally affirmations to myself, for people that I loved, and was responsive to what I felt like in 2020 was a lot of work that was centering white folks and their curiosities, and certainly new energy around anti-racism, but not necessarily work that was responsive to Black people who are in real time engaged in the work, but then also being impacted by these systems. And so it's one part Liberated Love Notes is one part affirmations, but it's also intended to begin to facilitate more critical self-reflection and understanding of who we are in these systems. And so it's affirming, it's loving, but my hope is also that it's facilitating some sort of unlearning, right, in service of us showing up as our most liberated selves. And so that it is and continues to be a love offering, a love project, but certainly a byproduct of my own just like personal wanderings. I'll say, in the spirit of honoring my intellectual lineage, deeply inspired by the work of our now ancestor Bell Hooks, who for me granted me permission to think more critically about how I, as a Black body, have internalized colonial, internalized oppression and internalized racism, and how what she refers to as a return to love involves, unlearning and doing that in community. And that not meaning that I'm any less committed to the work or committed to our people or a bad person any more than I am a human in a system that has, caused harm in how we think and be. So certainly inspired by the work of Bell Hooks, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, who reminds us that, hey, if we're not unlearning, we'll use the master's tools when we build our own. So I could go on. Let me stop and
breathe. Well, you are bringing some legendaries into this conversation, so I'm loving that. Again, I love the way that you honor others, and especially those that have inspired a lot of your work. But I also saw you reaching. You referenced the Liberated Love Notes for your partner, and I saw you reaching. So I feel like there's energy to share that with us. So we would be so honored.
So look at you. So, look at you. So I gotta find it. And so
okay. Well, while you're finding it, I'll give you a moment to find it. We did place into the chat how people can access the Liberated Love Notes. Like I said, mine are on order and on the way, and I look forward to being inspired and affirmed, because listen, I was listening to you, and this work is hard. And so we carry the burden oftentimes of the pain and suffering that those who trust us to just hear their stories and believe their stories. And that's a lot to carry. That is a lot to carry and walk around with. And so I value the fact that you have thought of a product, a way for people through this as a tool to be able to help navigate some of what they could be experiencing in those moments. And then I don't know if you can multitask, you're looking, but I was going to ask you, so once the cards were created, then you said, I want to take this message and bring it to a larger audience. And so podcast it is, right? Is that how that happened? How did you end up shifting to the podcast?
Yes. So I'm gonna so there's a whole story behind that that is uniquely grounded in my values. And so don't let me lose it. I'm gonna read you the I pulled out 3, but I'm only gonna read the one now that was really a love note to my partner and any Black person existing within a system that has caused harm to Black bodies. And so it says, if I am working within a white institution that has caused harm towards Black people, I recognize that my proximity to whiteness may create distrust among my community. This is not an indictment on me. This is a signal of my responsibility to reassure my allegiance to Black liberation. And so one of the things that I've tracked and, certainly want to honor is that there is often a toll that Black bodies experience as they are in institutions wanting to do the work, but also like balancing, like wanting to do the work, having to build trust with other Black. I think about the role of chief diversity officers, how they're like the proximity to leadership, but then there's also sometimes this like distrust among other Black folks within the institution. So important for us to experience, and this is one of my values, y'all, clarity around who we are in system and the responsibility we hold when we have proximity to power and institution. And so it's an affirmation, but then it's also like a call to hopefully think more critically, right, about how we're positioned. I got two more that I'll save for later. Don't let me, I'll save them for later.
We will not let you forget.
But I want to answer your question about the podcast. And so I wrote down Liberated. I wrote down affirmation cards in my journal, January 4th, 2021. January 4th last year. And then launched the idea, because I swear, spirit, ancestors, when they put something on you, provision is real. Launched it on my birthday that February. I shared it with a friend, an idea. This was just an idea. And this is why it's so good. Like, part of community care is having the right people in your circle who will gas you up and want to leverage their resources to amplify. I shared the idea before it was even printed with my good friend, Zach. Zach is the creator of Living Corporate Network. I said, Zach, I got this idea I want to do. I don't really have it like mapped out, but just what's your thoughts? Zach said, my thoughts is you need to do this, and I want to support you in getting the message out there. And I'm like, whoa, like, but interestingly enough, one of my values at the top of the year was collective. I was creating really being intentional about leveraging the power of the collective throughout the year 2021. Zach said, I feel like this message, certainly these cards are excellent. And what would it look like if you could begin to, or be a voice of encouragement for folks as they kick off their week? Like, literally, you're a voice of encouragement. He said, Liberated Love Knows needs to be a podcast. And initially I was like, nah, I just don't know. I'm prioritizing ease this year. I don't want to add more things to my plate.
Right.
And at the same time, and this is where provision comes into play, one of the beauties I feel like, or lessons in leveraging the collective, is that you don't have to do it all on your own. You know what I mean? And so for me, I was able to still prioritize ease because I journal, I had the content here, and all I really had to do was talk it through and show up in this medium, with assurance that I could be my authentic self. And so Liberated Love Notes has since evolved into a podcast where I share affirmations, reflections for us, by us, at the top of the week. And so season 1 is out there in the sphere, and I'm still processing what season 2 will look like, just based on all that is going on. I will say that you asked about the episode specific to DEI practitioners.
Yes, that's where I was going next. Yes.
So initially, this series, which is Black folks in white spaces, here are some nuggets to keep you feeling not just woke, but like whole as you're in system. Yeah. And then I started to journal one day on a Liberated Love Note specific to DEI, or Black folks in DEI, who feel like or who feel like doing the work, who feel like giving up when the work no longer feels like enough. And so that episode in particular are my reflections around what it's, y'all are so good in the chat. Anna, we see you.
My team is always on it, let me tell you.
What? Okay, we see. I mean, it's there. So are really my reflections around managing the toll of this work, prioritizing my values. Someone talked about boundaries, establishing emotional boundaries for myself, and honoring other people's boundaries. So I have the great pleasure of not just being a DEI practitioner, but then also leading a team of brilliant people. And a big part of my work, and as much as it is designing sessions and facilitating for other people, and I also must do the work myself, embody the work myself. And so this episode is a loving call to account for DEI practitioners to, yes, do the work, facilitate, help others, and ensure that we're developing a praxis for ourselves, because that can absolutely get lost. And then we end up perpetuating the same stuff that we seek to support others in disrupting and how they be. So that's the essence of that episode, a loving note of accountability, one that I hope is nourishing to Black folks specifically as we navigate this like unique time as DEI practitioners.
Yeah, that was so lovely. So lovely. It really was. And yeah, we do have the links to the podcast that you referenced and to the chat. This is so timely for me as well, because I'm working on a piece right now that aligns with what you're sharing, and that it's what I am phrasing as, love note to DEI practitioners, right? There's so many people that are gravitating to this space. And so I love the fact that there's this excitement about the work and there's this interest in this work. But I also, having experienced this work for quite some time, I know the heavy lift and the burdens that we carry as practitioners, as I referenced before. And so I don't be surprised if I reference you into this pinned work, and particularly direct people to your love notes. Yeah. So let's talk about, what do you advise for those looking to overcome imposter syndrome? Because I know that's also a part of, again, the self-love and knowing our worth. And so I want you just to touch on that as well, because it's definitely real.
Yeah. So it's so one of the cards that I pulled out kind of gets at that. And I actually wrote this one initially for my father. I wrote this one for my father, a Black man existing in a heavily white dominated industry and space. And it reads, "There will be moments when I feel like I do not belong. I will not internalize those moments as deficiency in me. Not only do I belong, but I am also worthy of taking up space." And so I have this love-hate relationship with the language of imposter syndrome, because sometimes it can be referenced as something that is inherent to us. Yeah. Like there is something in me that feels like I don't belong here, which is a very real feeling. Like we live in a culture of domination. And so one of the things you can always bet on is all of us somehow receiving a message from the system that we are not worthy, we don't belong. That's a unique, that's a symptom of a culture of domination. And as Black bodies in certain spaces, there's not often enough attention to the actual like systems, policies, cultural norms that create a context that would have us feel that way. And so when it comes to imposter syndrome and evolving, I would say evolving one's understanding of it is knowing that it's the system. Like you're not, you are not inherently less than it is. Right. You're not tripping by thinking that you don't belong, the system is actually working as it is intended for you to feel that way. Now, I think this is the beauty of developing a critical consciousness, because it's kind of like the difference between being, from my perspective, in a space on autopilot and being in a space where you can take these sort of like liberal pauses and check like, oh, wow, this is what's happening here.
Yes.
I'm able to take a step back and be like, oh, I'm feeling this way because we're using coded language that is very much so linked to white dominant cultural norms. And that's not inherent to who I am. So of course, I'm not going to feel like I'm able to track all of that because of, the work that I've done to certainly understand myself, but understand systems. I love Dr. Love's approach to a liberatory consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant body of work, I feel like, when it comes to developing understanding of systems. It ain't us and them, it's us and it. How do we unravel that? And how does it influence how I'm showing up? And so I also think that the, one of the bodies of work that I have become more, because I know Anam and Courtney are going to want to show y'all this. I'm gonna grab this book. Hold on really quick.
Okay, sure.
One of the bodies of work that has helped me as a Black person, and this connects back to your question around imposter syndrome, has been understanding the sort of like inherent ways of being related to the Black cultural experience. Because in the corporate context, especially if you've spent a good deal of your time and life and career there, it becomes like a perpetual forgetting, meaning like you forget who you are, you forget what may be there because you're being asked to conform and assimilate into this. This read has been a Sankofic one for me. It's called Spirituality in the Black Helping Tradition. Brittany, what does that have to do with imposter syndrome? The more I understand about myself, the less I even question the fidelity of imposter syndrome, right? Yes. And so the Black Helping Tradition, a work by Martin and Martin, actually the founders, the late Elmer Martin and his wife, who is still here in Baltimore, are the founders of the Great Blacks in Wax Museum. And the Black Helping Tradition, I think, is an excellent read for any Black person who is doing what they call caregiving work. Work to move forward our collective struggle and collective well-being, because it emphasizes the role of the spiritual self, the racial self, and this third one, I heard it on last week's talk, the communal self, right? The communal self. It's a remembering. The more you know about yourself, the less the imposter syndrome lie is even, right? A thing. Yeah. I'll pause because
no, that's so good. And I resonate with that. And I agree with you, Brittany, because what comes to mind for me is it's a misdiagnosis. And that's actually how I label it. I have a session that I do, and it's about imposter syndrome, and it's, imposter syndrome and misdiagnosis. That's precisely what it is. Yes. And so, I am definitely tracking with you on that. So we're going to be shifting momentarily to take your questions. I'm sure this audience has much to contribute to the conversation and probably some very specific questions they would like for you to address. And so I'm going to ask one more question, and then I will give this audience an opportunity. And you can ask your questions by sharing it in the chat. If you don't want to come off mute and present your question live, that's totally fine. We love to see smiling faces. We love to hear from others. And so if that's something you're comfortable with, then we definitely would love to give you that opportunity. So you mentioned that your goals this year are centered around clarity, ease, and perspective. So tell us more about this and how it transcends into the work that you do.
So it's clarity, ease, and I probably misspoke, collective. My bad, collective. And so those are three intentions that have since evolved into like my core values. I emphasize that because in the spirit of transparency and self-love, self-care, I have a therapist. And so one of the activities, so one of the activities that she had me do, brilliant. One of the activities that she had me do as I was trying to just wrestle with and process a lot that's going on in my life, she said, write out all your values. A lot of times when we're in situations where we're trying to decide like what to do, we do pro and cons lists.
Yeah.
And that kind of perpetuates a binary, right?
Mm.
She said, write out all your values and every time and think about everything that's going on in your life. Then group those things by like values fulfillment and those things that are like values violators.
Mm-hmm.
I get to your question. And so in as much as those started out as intentions for how I wanted to just like govern myself throughout the year, clarity supports me in understanding, especially in the context of our work, what is my immediate sphere of influence and impact? Because we can get really overwhelmed and take on a lot that ain't even our work. Clarity is part of radical self-love and care. Ease. You know, I'm unlearning the conflation. And I think I heard you say this, Dr. Nika, the conflation of excellence and perfectionism. And
Yes.
Yeah. And so ease for me is this way of identifying incremental ways to just pause, disrupt sense of urgency and how I react, learning to settle my body, which I'm really proud of, as that was a really big part of my work last year and is ongoing. And then collective, how I strive to, again, center community and just how I be. To your and so to bring it all together, and as much as that was like just a guiding light initially at the top of the year, it has since now helped me like just track how I engage and even my triggers when in community with others. I now know that when I have a reaction, it might be because not that I'm just in my feelings or not, it is my values are likely being violated here. Let me get curious about what's going on here.
Yes.
My value of ease which is core to who we are, is being violated here. Let me figure out what boundary I might need to put in place or how I might need to communicate a boundary. And as much as the words, from my perspective, they end up being, remember I told you earlier I was going to show you a picture. Divinely, it is the time has come. I'm about to show you. So the reason why this value stuff is important, y'all. And I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Nika White and team before the call, and I was telling them about my journal and how my journal has become such a big part of my processing. Let me show you why this values thing is so important. A couple months, it's here. No, it is absolutely here.
You just had it right before the top of the hour.
Here it is. Okay. So the reason why this values exercise for me is important, setting intentions is important, it is because it keeps me rooted. It keeps me rooted. So I drew this picture, y'all, in my journal sometime last year. And it was actually because I was processing an affirmation that I had wrote for myself. I am not my work. I wrote that a couple last year, like I am not my work, as an affirmation and boundary statement. And I was trying to establish greater clarity for myself around what I actually meant by that, right? And what I was wanting to affirm is what it means to be rooted in something other than what you do. I am rooted in my values, my history, intergenerational wisdoms. I see that sprout out.
Your faith there.
I see that show up in the world through my purpose, but then also because I am not my work shows up as a leaf, a branch, as do hobbies, as do what else I got on here, y'all? Your job, your practice. And so when you're rooted, if you know anything about cutting down trees, you can like cut this down and it's like the roots are still going to be there.
Right.
Winter will come and the stuff will, the leaves will fall, but the tree is still there. And so if my call to action, or if there was a call to action, what does it mean to be, rooted? What are your values? What history? Who are you from? What faith and spiritual traditions can you begin to embody to stay rooted? What generational gifts? We talk a lot about, and then I'm gonna really be quiet. We talk a lot about, rightfully so, all the ways in which we need to heal from generational, traumas. And I have reveled in the gifts and inheritances of those who have come before me. That's important too. Honoring that. So that's the values conversation. I hope it was meaningful.
It was incredibly meaningful, incredibly meaningful. You're getting a lot of great commentary into the chat. So I do hope that after today, you'll have a chance to review some of the great feedback that's coming from the chat. So I have so much more I could lean into, but I am not going to be selfish. This community is here because they also wanted to hear from you. And so I want to give those who have joined here today an opportunity. If you feel empowered and inclined to want to contribute to the conversation with a resource or a comment or a very specific question for our guest co-host today, I want to invite you to unmute yourself at this time and share. And we can do this by the raise hand feature as well, so I can easily kind of find you and spotlight you. But who has a question or comment for our community today?
I'm tracking some of the chat too. Rachel, I see your question, by the way. I'm
Rachel, do you want to come? Do you want to join?
I'm looking for a good one. I love this.
Absolutely. I'm listening. Sorry, my camera's not working, everyone.
I'm
not being rude. But this has been a very emotional, intentional conversations for me. And I guess my question is, what love note would you give a Black boy who is struggling in a predominantly white school? And I guess I just did not, I'm Black, and I've been around white people my whole time, but I'm realizing that I have such a thick skin that he does not. But also I did not have constant images of Black men being killed daily. And I didn't have white counterparts who made fun of that and mock that at school. And I was not an only one, and he is. So he needs a love note, Brittany. So what love note would you give a young Black boy who is in a system that's not created for him?
And you know what, Rachel, this speaks to me as a mother, certainly, but even a caregiver to Black boys. Am mindful of the toll that, like, this is heavy. And am so sending you love, and just want to affirm that, for what it's worth, and I'll get to the love note, he deserves better. He absolutely, our children, I think about, as adults, how difficult it is to process and be in those spaces, and how our children absolutely deserve better. I am a Black body existing in a world that would suggest I am less than or deficient. But this is not my truth, and I reject those lies. I am not less than. I am not deficient. And then another one, right? Because in as much as I feel like adults in white spaces deserve spaces where they can prioritize community, I feel like children especially I deserve spaces to process my lived experiences, healing, and trauma without the white gaze. And I actually feel like that is an imperative at this age, especially as we figure out how to, where possible, hopefully hopefully remove ourselves from environments that are toxic, but then also create opportunities for us and our children to heal from them, because we deserve better. He deserves better. So sending you love, because I am mindful of the weird space we are often in as caregivers, striving to, provide and give. I think about, and I speak from, this is like one of my rememberings, not judging my parents. I remember when the goal was to get us out of Baltimore City. I remember, and in processing, what it must have meant to think that distancing ourselves from Blackness was necessary in order for us to, be set or good. I'm just like processing all of that, even as I try to reimagine differently for, my liberated 5-year-old. Right. And so yeah.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. So I'm going to go to Rachel now. I'm actually going to spotlight you. You have your hand raised, and then we'll go to Gail after Rachel. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you joining our community today.
Oh, thank you so much for having us and creating this safe space. It's honestly a psychologically safe space to be in. And Brittany, I have so many questions to ask you, but I promise I'll only ask one. And I think, when George Floyd was murdered, there were many, many racial experiences that I had definitely left in my subconscious mind to continue working in the spaces that I was working in. And I think that was a catalyst and a very big trigger, and like you, in creating my podcast. And I believe that these authentic conversations that we're having today is healing. It's therapeutic, right? And when was it that you realized that you had to establish boundaries? Boundaries is a big thing for Black women. Right? When did you realize, what was your trigger? When were you triggered to realize that now I have to start creating boundaries?
So let me tell you this, talk about where I'm from. So I feel like before I even had the language, or we even had the language of boundaries, Loretta, my mother, was like team boundaries. And so let me just give you this example. This is what I mean by it's in us. My mom was one of those moms, even though she was young, where she was like, you know what, you ain't about to do anything or everything around my child, even to her elders, which is kind of taboo in the community because we're taught to like revere. Wow. You're not about to, you're not about to be, nope, she can't go over there. Nope, she can't stay with you. Nope. Mom was team boundaries before I even realized it. They used to say, Loretta be acting funny. And so fast forward, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, 30 or so years later, I think for me, remembering that was in me was right before the pandemic, right before the global pandemic. So the end of 2019. And I was really starting to feel like, and I can say this, transparently, I was really starting to call into question just the DEI industry in general. Like what in the, it just started to feel like a lot was going on. And then maybe there's a whole bunch, it necessarily wasn't always yielding the impact that I would expect. That is also okay, because I could fall into the trap of binaries myself and start like, that's the wrong way, that's the right way, that's the wrong way, that's the wrong way. But I think what it triggered in me was this need to establish more emotional boundaries. Britt, the entire DEI industry is not your work. I mean, you're part of it. Mm-hmm. You can influence change, but like be mindful. I've only been in the game for like a decade. There are people who've been doing this for way longer than I. And so for me, it was a matter of like, emotional boundaries. You're a little bit too emotionally, yes, it's personal. Yes, it influences your lived experiences, and you're a little bit too emotionally invested at this point. Anytime there's such thing as like being overly critical, I was over, what I mean? How do you hold space? I think Bell talks about this, right? How do you, there's this balance of loving accountability, right? There's this fine balance of like loving accountability. I want to write on that soon. And so for me, once I started to feel a little too overly critical, I was like, yeah, we need some emotional boundaries here. Yeah, I'm not reading White Fragility. I'm going to start reading restorative things that make me feel good about this work and myself. There are levels to being woke. Yeah. You know what I mean? And there's a path to getting woke that doesn't have to be centered on Black pain. There's a pathway to woke and heightened consciousness that doesn't have to be centered on like Black trauma. There's a pathway to knowing and understanding that doesn't have to be grounded in like how we are harmed by system. And I like it there. I like it there.
We have to change the language. And we have to change our mindset. Matter.
Yes, language. Rochelle, we could have a whole
listen.
I mean,
Well, the great thing is, I'll announce. The great thing is that Rochelle is going to actually be joining us as a guest, and a host on a future show. And so, yes, maybe we have to lean into that when you come back to join us. But yes, a whole conversation on its own could take place just on that topic. So thank you for being here today and sharing. Gail, I want to go to you now, and this is probably going to be the last question we can take, unfortunately, but I'm going to spotlight you now. And I do know that Brittany has a hard stop, so I do want to honor what she's brought to the conversation today by making sure that we can get her out of here on time. Go for it, Gail. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Brittany and Dr. White. This is my first time in this space, and what an introduction. My heart is full. Two questions. One, when are you going to bring back the shirt? I have to have it. I went on your website and I was like, I need that shirt.
Okay, Gail.
I need the shirt.
We have to tell everybody, what shirt are we talking about? I saw it in the chat earlier, and I'm familiar with all the products that, of course, are out there. So share the shirt.
America does not deserve Black women because they surely do not. Get me the shirt, please.
Yeah,
I want one too. My hands raised.
America. Look, that shirt done got me in trouble. That's all. It is the facts.
It is a fact, and we cannot deny facts. So please, get back the shirt. And second of all, and I know we're running out of time, and maybe this is something we could talk about later, but what happens in spaces where you feel like you're being pitted against other Black women in particular, other people of color, when you are in a DEI space and you feel like you're in an adversarial relationship with other Black women, that to me it hit different. That's a different kind of pain.
It hit different. One of my learnings, one of the bodies of work that I introduced into my personal practice in 2019 into 2020 was somatic abolitionism, and being very attuned to like just how my body, how trauma exists in my body, and more specifically, you named it, how horizontal trauma is projected as it relates to, or because of our experiences under sort of the vertical trauma of white supremacy. And so I want to affirm that it absolutely does hit different. It has helped me to take on a trauma-informed approach to how I understand those relationships. Yes, there is a very real impact, and I'm a little bit more curious about like what happened. It ain't just that it ain't just crabs and Brill, it ain't just people, it really is an unlearning that has not yet happened. It's also, and I'm about to read you this Liberated Love note that was actually written to get at that. It has also helped me to get real intentional about how I distance myself emotionally, because sometimes we feel like just because, we love Black people, yes, I have a love of Black folks. And there are sometimes boundaries when relationships are abusive that need to be in place. There needs to be clarity around what is my work and what is their work, and how I shouldn't be owning their work. And so here's the liberated love note I have for you, Gail.
Before you read that, Brittany, I just want to quickly say that I know you have a hard break. And so I want us to end with that note. I want to just go ahead and say my goodbyes and my thank yous to everyone for being here today, including you, Brittany. So yes, close us out. Close us out.
It reads, I am loving, gracious, and invested in the growth of those with whom I am in relationship. Still, I will not internalize nor own others' work as my own. They are not my work. Clarity, y'all. They are not our work. I appreciate y'all so much, Dr. Nika,
Thank you.
Anam, Courtney, Amora, everybody that made this happen, and everybody here.
Thank you so much. Take great care. Bye-bye.
Alrighty.